welcome to the surprise of LinkedIn with me and Allison K. Williams. This is going to be, I think, a very interactive discussion about LinkedIn and more broadly about social media, what we're doing there, how we want our experience maybe to shift or change. Before we dive into the discussion, I just want to thank the sponsor of my Electric Speed newsletter and these free sessions. This month's sponsor is Barbara Kyle. She's running a webinar this month about your first 30 pages. If you go to that link there on the slide, you can register for free and participate in that session. So thank you, Barbara, for sponsoring my newsletter. All right. So some months ago, it was in the fall, I think, Allison mentioned to me that she keeps hearing that LinkedIn is an awesome way to connect with more people, but it feels sterile and corporate. She's not sure how to interact, but maybe it's finally time to learn. So what should she do there? There are a lot of different moving pieces to LinkedIn. There's groups, there's newsletters, there's articles, etc. How much time does it really deserve? Allison, do you want to elaborate on LinkedIn?
Well, I mean, I've always been a mix of I'd like to write thoughtful pieces that mostly end up either on the Brevity blog or on your blog, sometimes places like Writer's Digest magazine. And I like to be a random popping off stuff that came into my head person, which I've historically done on Twitter. And I used to use Instagram for writing little meaningful miniature essays, either about writing craft or about my travels. And I'm really kind of missing a platform where I don't turn it on and videos shriek at me, or where I feel like I'm subsidizing the destruction of democracy.
Yeah, so that actually brings me to my first little story that I wanted to share, where things kind of started to go downhill a little bit. Not for this specific reason, but it just felt like the whole environment was degrading everywhere I went. Um, it was Mother's Day of 2023, and I have these beautiful videos, home movies that my father took when I was born. I was born prematurely, and here I am in an incubator with my mother poking at my cheeks. And it's like, I don't know, maybe like a 30-second video of, the first week or two of my life. I was my mother's sixth child. It was a high risk pregnancy because she was quite advanced in age. Anyway, I tell this story in the Instagram caption, a little mini essay. And as you can see, it was a very popular post. Like, it's Mother's Day, it's a charming video. Who doesn't like babies, right? So there was someone who got into the comments and decided to go on kind of a mini rant about how my mother was a victim of the patriarchy and she was forced to give birth to me. And it was basically making me feel bad for being born. And I was like, really? This is what you want to comment on a lovely video on Mother's Day? And I was just like, what has happened? What 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 has gone wrong here? And you won't find that comment now because, of course, I deleted it. And I, to be honest, I haven't been as active on Instagram since, and I've had similar
Yeah.
experiences like that on on all of the social media sites except for LinkedIn. I'm not saying that makes LinkedIn superior at all, but it's just to kind of point to the very different place that LinkedIn is. And of course,
Yeah.
I also wouldn't post this video on LinkedIn either. So there's also that difference. But Allison, I imagine you have stories like this yourself? Maybe not the baby video, but something like it.
Weirdly enough, I wrote a newsletter like 2 weeks ago. Many of you who are here on my list, I wrote a newsletter where I talked about buying a used couch and how here in Dubai, some of the furniture is really over the top. We saw this like gilt monstrosity that looked like at any moment Lumiere was going to pop out warbling that we should be our guest. And we bought this sofa, even though we think of ourselves as tasteful furniture people. And it was, like kind of haha, we bought this like wacky sofa. Somebody messaged me back and said, please take me off your newsletter list. I am offended by your bragging. And I'm like, really? I bought a used sofa.
You're bragging.
And I think I've been very lucky because back in the early days of like Blogspot, I got a fair amount of negative commentary because I was writing on an inflammatory subject. And that kind of inoculated me
Yeah.
to social media in general. I'm not shy about blocking people. I'm not shy about deleting comments. And
Yeah.
most of the time, if somebody says something, it's something I've heard before. And I'm like,
Yeah.
really? That's the best you've got? But occasionally, yeah, it'll slip through and it'll poison me
Yeah.
on what's going on in a larger sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about LinkedIn specifically. So the caveat I'm going to add to this, because when we start getting into my profile uh, information and interaction, you're going to see I have really high numbers. I've got like more than 80,000 followers. I've been on LinkedIn practically since the beginning. I worked in a corporate job. I built up a network over 5 years because of that corporate job. I worked at 2 universities. And every time you go to a new job, you get this huge influx of connection requests and other activity on your profile where you're recommending people. And, it's so, there's all of that history baked in to my LinkedIn profile. And I also, have a couple companies that have LinkedIn pages. Not that I do anything with them, but that's also kind of feeding the beast here. So I just want to put that out there. I don't other people's experience, like if you're just now starting, I'm not saying you're going to be able to get to 80,000 followers. I think that's just an artifact of my own activity over a very long period of time. Okay, so with that out of the way, I do think that over the past 3 years in particular, like LinkedIn was not a place I went. Sometimes I would share blog posts there, but I wasn't really doing anything that was material to my business or to sharing what I do. But I noticed, when I got a little more consistent with posting things there, mainly articles appearing at my site, that was the bulk of it. It was getting a lot of engagement, more comments and engagement than any other social media platform. And other people noticed this too. So, for example, Benedict Evans, he's in the tech industry, has nothing to do with writing and publishing, but I follow him for his tech industry analysis. And he commented quite recently, it seems a little odd for people to argue about Threads versus Blue Sky versus Mastodon versus Twitter, when actually a huge amount of activity moved to LinkedIn, and not just the B2B sales memes either. So for those who aren't aware, LinkedIn has this terrible reputation for being full of B2B activity and people getting pitched on stuff that you're probably not interested in if you're a writer, an editor, a novelist. If you're here on this session, you're probably in the writing and publishing community. So, and then you see one of the responses is a little piece of anecdata about how you know they got a lot more mileage out of LinkedIn than other places, and I've noticed the same. So now, Allison, have you been? I was a very bad presenter today, and I didn't check your LinkedIn profile to see if you've been methodically posting lately. Have you?
I have set up something through an automatic posting feed where my brevity blogs show up on LinkedIn. I have been trying to remember to go over and leave comments on other people's stuff when they repost something of mine or when they post something that I think is cool. Right now, for me, it feels like the very beginning of Facebook, where I'm like, I'm not entirely sure what I'm supposed to be doing on here. Am I only allowed to talk to people I already know? What happens in these groups? And I joined them, but now I don't know where I find them. I'm just really sort of wandering around going, oh, what does this button do?
Okay. So I did a little side by side comparison of some of my recent posts to just make sure that I wasn't imagining things about LinkedIn having as much or more engagement. I did it with 2 posts from the last week. So one of them was this NaNoWriMo post that author Eleanor Florence wrote. Great post, by the way. It's about why NaNoWriMo might not work for you. And if you compare the engagement, LinkedIn is running ahead in terms of likes or hearts or whatever, the little icon responses. And it's about equivalent in terms of comments to Facebook. Now, Facebook is where I generally see the most engagement of all the social media platforms as far as commenting, but it really depends on the post. NaNoWriMo pushes a lot of people's buttons. So it got more comments on Facebook than maybe my average post. And it also got quite a few comments on LinkedIn. I also threw in Threads, Blue Sky, and Substack Notes, just to show where I'm getting engagement. Substack Notes is actually quite good for me because there's so many writers and editors and writing Substacks there. So I'm pretty devoted to posting on Substack. Threads and Blue Sky is just kind of like, I don't put a lot of effort into them. I don't get a lot of engagement, but what's interesting, I think, about LinkedIn and Threads specifically is they tend to have a long, slow burn, meaning like Threads, I might not really see the engagement until the next day. I don't know what that's about. LinkedIn also, I will still get comments and reactions over even a week later. There's actually some of my most popular LinkedIn posts. I actually had to turn off the comments because I don't want to argue about this anymore with people. I'm done. And
So
you
you're
can't,
seeing longevity on there. You're seeing
yeah,
stuff have a tail. Wow.
exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, I like that LinkedIn allows you to turn off the comments at any point that you want when you're like, okay, we're we're done now. And it does offer, we'll also take a look here at some of the analytics. It does give you a really good idea. You can see right there the number of impressions.
Mhm.
So it's much more like numbers forward as you might expect from a business platform, which is I like that. But let's look at another post. So this next one, this is strictly self-promotion. It's not content oriented. I'm just giving myself a pat on the back here. My paid newsletter was mentioned in this roundup of where to get publishing industry news. So you can see on LinkedIn, LinkedIn is the classic place to go pat yourself on the back for a business success, and people will go in there and say, "Congratulations, way to go," and it's great. Whereas in some of the other places, it maybe it depends on it just depends. But LinkedIn, you will generally see the most outsized reaction to successes. Um,
Well, it
next,
seems like
oh,
congratulations is a nice, easy thing I can deliver without worrying I'm doing it wrong.
yes, yes. And also, as we're going to get to, LinkedIn will feed you things to comment without you having to write it, which is both a blessing and a curse.
Mhm.
So if you were to click into those analytics, so just to make sure everyone saw this, so notice on the LinkedIn that says 5,419 impressions, and then there's
Mhm.
that little view analytics. If you click on the view analytics, you can then look at, okay, who engaged with this? What are their job titles? What are their locations? What are their industries? What's the company size, if that matters? And so this obviously reflects who I've connected with on LinkedIn, and everyone's is going to be different. But I think I find it obviously super useful for me when I'm thinking about where should I have events? Who am I actually reaching here? What percentage of my audience is in book publishing versus magazine publishing versus higher education? If I post something that's more about this audience, am I really actually reaching them, et cetera, et cetera? So you don't get this, at least on the sorts of accounts I run on the other platforms. Like I don't have a
Now,
business page
Jane,
on
do you
Facebook.
have a professional account or can anyone see these analytics? Like I don't have a paid account. I have a free account. Would I be able to
Mm-hmm.
to see these analytics as well?
Yeah, this is free for everyone. I've never paid a dime for LinkedIn. I don't recommend paying for LinkedIn unless you're like a job seeker, a recruiter. I don't think that probably describes anyone today, but unless you are like, I don't know, you have some need for those premium features. I can't imagine why you would pay for them. At least you, Allison, I can't imagine at this stage why
And
you would pay.
and you have a verified account. I
Mhm.
have a couple of times gone, oh, maybe I should verify. And then they want my facial recognition and I nope right on out of there. But I did discover that I can verify with Clear and I already have Clear for travel. It's a way to get through the security line faster. So I'm going to see if I can hook that up. But have you found that being verified is useful?
I verified so long ago that I don't remember the difference between verified and not verified. So,
Okay.
maybe someone in the chat can mention if they went through that, if what sort of difference that it makes. But I can't say.
Awesome. We'll check it out. Thank you.
So I will be very upfront and say, if you're looking, like if you're a novelist, if you're a children's author, I don't think you're going to find like your core readership here, unless it's maybe by happenstance. Um, but that doesn't mean you couldn't get use out of it. Now, Allison's in a different position, so I'm just going to set aside her concerns for a moment. Although, you may have a memoir or a novel come out in the future, but let's say not at the moment. We're not going to focus on that. But I do. There was a client I worked with for a while who is in the finance industry, and he has started releasing a children's book series about children and money. And so obviously this makes a ton of sense for him to market and promote this on his LinkedIn profile, which obviously he does. It's right there in the banner. He's got all of the covers there. This is a best practice, et cetera. And then you can see in his about, he's talking about why, his mission, why, he's doing these books. And so I think this is just a really beautiful model to take a look at if there's an intersection between whatever you do in your professional life and the books that you publish. Now, even if that's not the case, I do think there are some reasons that you might want to use LinkedIn to network in the publishing community. But before I get to that, I'll just mention another really great example of someone who I think uses LinkedIn to its fullest effect. This is Elise Benin. She has been on the marketing side of I should say, she's kind of like me, but for book designers or for artists, other creative people. And so she helps people with the business aspects of their creative profession. She's really
Can
well known.
I interrupt here?
Yes.
I love that she has a QR code right there
Yes.
because I'm guessing that lets you sign up for her email list
Yes.
to get the free newsletter, which lets you cycle some people off of LinkedIn into
Yes.
your own ecosystem. That is so clever, Jane. You have
Yes.
brilliantly picked a slide that showed me exactly what I needed to see.
Yes. That's exactly why it's there. So this is a freebie that she has been offering forever. I'm sure that it changes and evolves, et cetera, but people love this worksheet. I have seen the worksheet. It is a brilliant worksheet. You should all download the worksheet. So this is someone who, like, I think LinkedIn is, I've never talked to her about it, but I have to imagine it's one of the more important places that she engages. Okay, so here's just kind of my take, and you don't have to go any further for those attending. If you have things to do, here's my take. It's about staying visible in your community, especially for experts, authorities, and freelancers. For authors who don't necessarily have an intersection, like I've discussed, it might help you with networking among publishing industry professionals, especially if you already have a book and a traditional publisher. But please, 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 please do not go on LinkedIn to pitch your book. Don't do it. Please, please don't do it.
And, Jane, that I think is something that is so true for all kinds of social media. I was on a short text site. I can't remember if it was Twitter or Blue Sky, but somebody was saying they'd posted about their book and then they'd taken it down and because it had gotten no engagement and they were really discouraged. Are there any writers even here? And I was curious, so I scrolled back through that person's feed and I'm like, oh, it's because your feed says, I wrote a book, please buy it, and there's a little bit about the book, but there is no successful advertising anywhere on any platform, not even the bathroom wall, that is, I have this thing, please buy it. I mean, you at least say for a good time, call Susie before you scribble your phone number on the wall of the toilet. It's got to be, there's got to be something in it. Either it's going to entertain you or it's going to enlighten you or it's going to help you become more of who you want to be. But I wrote this thing, please buy it is not effective in any context, anywhere, anyhow.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. And I would also say that for those of us who are authors, I think one of the things I'm seeking, and from what I can see in the chat, is I want to connect with more authors where I can see them regularly, see what they're up to. Like when Instagram was a bit smaller, I loved that when I got to a writing conference, I'm like, oh, how's your new dog? Congratulations on your grandkid. I love that publication that you had. And I have a hard time now seeing the people that I actually want to see. And so I'm hoping that maybe LinkedIn will provide some of that
Yeah.
community element that is
Yeah.
not even so much let me network with people who can do me good as an author, but let me network
Yeah.
with people who are my colleagues.
Yes, absolutely. So that actually segues so beautifully into the next thing I want to show, which is kind of a peek at my feed. And I took a bunch of these screenshots over the last few days, kind of showing how, because I only connect with people I consider colleagues, and that includes authors, but it's people I would consider professional connections. I'm seeing things that are really relevant to my work. And you can see it's very book oriented. That's because I've been very intentional in who I'm connecting with. Um, Interestingly, just yesterday, someone who runs kind of like a storytelling company, I've never actually, I haven't heard his name before, but he included me on a roundup of newsletters he reads, and he has a really huge following. But he comes from another industry. He comes from some sort of B2B industry. And so I got flooded with like 150 connection requests from people I do not know, from not the writing and publishing industry. And I'd said no to everyone. And I
Wow.
think you have to really be disciplined, or else you're not going to have the experience you want on LinkedIn. Um, so that I'm just putting that out there. I don't think you should feel guilted for connecting with people that you genuinely don't want to see what's happening in their professional lives and sometimes personal lives. So here we have Blake Atwood going to a Malcolm Gladwell event. We've got Wudong Yan, who's a freelancer telling a story about a client that reneged on her. We've got a mastering publishing podcast that just got launched. We do have one news story in here about the Onion buying InfoWars, which was everywhere that day. Was that yesterday, in fact? We've got the release of a really interesting new book, Shelf Life, about, believe it's about women in publishing, independent publishing, I think. We've got another author with a book release, having an event at Dublin Airport. We've got Serendipity Literary Agency announcing a new client. So you can kind of see, like, I like this. This is relevant to me, and these are all people I know and would engage with at a conference, and it helps me, because I'm in Cincinnati, especially since I'm in Cincinnati, I'm not like in a publishing center. It just really helps me keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on.
So, Jane, should I be purging my connections of people from my previous circus career, my previous teaching career? Can I, like on Facebook, I can unfollow people and still be
Yeah.
connected to them. What should I do with people who are not as relevant to what I'm doing right now?
So you can hide people or mute people in your feed. So if you want to maintain the connection, but you just don't want to see them in your feed, you can do that. And there are also
Okay.
ways to, as with any social network, to create your own kind of customized feeds where you can just see what you want. Just checking the chat to see if there's hello to the other Cincinnatian.
Yeah.
I see someone warning about Wilder's warning about the people who want to count you as a connection but do not want to connect. I'm seeing Irina saying she's purged people. I did go through a purge myself when I realized my mistake of connecting with so many people I didn't know. Okay. All right. So here's maybe some of the downside, which kind of is getting touched on a little bit, I think, already in the chat, which is the face that people put on for LinkedIn can be quite different than anywhere else. And there's sometimes just a little bit of I hesitate to call it fakery or superficial, but if people are looking for a job or trying to land clients, or there's just this professional sheen that I think maybe this is what turns you off, Alice, and you're like, can I really engage? Like, are these going to be human beings, or are they going to be automatons pitching me on crypto? And I think it really goes back to who is it that you're connecting with. And I think it is possible to have a pretty good experience without running into the crypto bros. Um, I also think you can totally have a voice. I mean, it is in some sense a more I'm not going to say relentlessly positive, but it's more optimistic, it's more future oriented, it's looking generally at um, the positive side of things. But I think this is one of the reasons that so many people have ended up going there, because you're not getting some like the blame and the shame and the feel bad and the you suck, because that does not play well in this environment, in a business environment. So what do you think? Do you think?
Well, I mean, one of the things I was wondering is who should I be on LinkedIn? Because, like, on Instagram, I try to be meaningful. On Brevity Blog, I try to be educational. On Twitter, I used to try to just be like funny and clever. Uh, do I need to be like my best teacher self? Do I, who should I show on LinkedIn? And I think some of that leads to what's the community that I'm able to create there? I mean, when
Yeah.
your community is really good on LinkedIn, what does it do for you? Does it bring you more readers? Does it bring you more colleagues? How does it benefit you to be there?
I mean, if it's a post with good engagement from people that I think know their business, that I respect in the business, then you're getting like meaningful conversation about business issues that matter to you. There is an annoying effect that I'll mention later, where people will just drive into the comments without anything substantive to say, but you just ignore those people and you focus on the ones that are actually meaningfully contributing. So since I report on the industry and I'm, often involved in trying to figure out news and developments and perspectives, I'm very much in kind of analytic mode when I'm posting on LinkedIn and trying to find patterns and explanations. And so,
Now,
yeah.
in the chat, Brian says, in my experience, LinkedIn is not for personal stories or anecdotes. Stick to the facts and keep it brief. Yet Brian comes from an accounting background. Brian, you were an incredible numbers guy. Now you're becoming an author. Jane, is it more precise, more clinical, more sterile, or is it more writery, I guess?
Oh, I think there are all sorts of personal stories being told on LinkedIn in my feed. I mean, maybe not among accountants, but just to go back to this slide, if you look at Wudan Yan's post, she talks about how today I told a client they could take me off their list of potential freelancers. And then she tells of what I consider a very professional or personal story, but it's also professional from her professional life. And she also is in a similar position um, to us, Allison, in that she's working with other writers, trying to help them succeed in their careers in addition to being a writer herself. So I mean, I see personal stories all the time. I think there's no one getting on here and telling stories in an effort to gain generally to gain like sympathy. It's really much more to demonstrate, here's something I learned, or here's something learn from my mistake. Here's a practice that really woke me up. Those sorts of things.
And I think I will not have a problem with that because I have spent my life in all of my professions being very, very careful about what is public and what is private, and working very hard to make the public self be as genuine and connected as the private self. It just deals with different topics.
Yeah. I think one
Yeah.
of the challenges with LinkedIn is so many people on there are using it in a very buttoned up way. And so you might think that's how it's done. That's what you should do. But not everyone is like that. So you can and you'll probably get more engagement and other people will have a better time if you
Mhm.
really are yourself. But obviously there are some lines that people don't cross there. It's generally, but not always, a no politics zone. And you're usually not posting the family photos, things that you would expect more on
Yeah.
Facebook.
But like I've never been a family photo poster on any of my other platforms either. So that's not
Right.
really that different for me.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so a few practical points. Now, Allison, I think your profile is pretty up to date, if I recall. But for those who are listening and watching, do update your profile, even if you're not going to use LinkedIn, just because it's getting more engagement, more traffic. I would update your profile if it's dusty. If you have books, put them in the banner, as Josh Bernoff does here. Write a headline that makes sense. That's like, that's I say what you want to be known for. So notice Josh Bernoff says, I help nonfiction authors succeed. Perfect. Um, Now here's again, be careful that you don't follow the lead of, I'm just going to call them the buttoned up people, where they put all of the letters after their name, or they put all of the topics that they consider themselves to be experts in. I think it's actually better to take the Josh Bernoff human approach that's readable and relatable. Um, then notice underneath there, after his location, he has resources for business authors. This is a link to his website and to his email newsletter list, essentially. So you can customize that text to say whatever you want. And Allison, I believe yours is customized, if I remember correctly. Um,
I think it is.
yeah. So in other words, you don't want it to say AllisonKWilliams.com. You want it to say something that would prompt people to actually click on it.
You
And
know, I feel like an idiot, but I don't think I even have a website on there right now.
oh, for some reason I thought you did. I might be confusing
I
you with
don't
someone
think I
else.
do. Yeah, no, I think I need to update my profile.
I do think it also helps to be pretty exhaustive with certain sections of the profile, if depending on who you want to connect with, right? So let's say Josh Bernoff never wants to connect with anyone from MIT. He should probably take that off his profile if he really hated that experience. But I'm betting that he welcomes those connections, and that's why it's sitting there. So obviously make those decisions based on what you welcome. If you go to add to your profile, if you haven't been on LinkedIn in a while, there are so many more things that you can add. You can add services that you offer. You can explain career breaks. You can add your test scores. I'm not going to do that. I'm way past that point in my life. Honors and awards, et cetera, et cetera. You can add publications. So that's where you could potentially add books. And there's also like a little featured section. I don't, let's see if I cut it off, but there's also things that you can feature in your profile if you wish that appear right under the about section. So I would use that strategically to point to things that you really want people to know about. It could be an email newsletter sign up, it could be your latest book, and so on. So after you know, shape up your profile, that's when you'll think about posting. I think the easiest strategy, and what I do, like this is like 80% of what I do, is I post whenever I've written something somewhere else. That's it.
Mhm.
Um, and then I pay attention to the comments. So I'm checking in every so often and engaging with people who have questions or adding my thoughts. And for those who are like, what is there really a point to that? And oh, I should add, I don't think it pays to automate this. So Allison, you mentioned that you automated. I can't say for sure what the LinkedIn algorithms do differently if you post, as yourself, like going to the site versus an automator, but I feel better when I go there and I just do it. Um, so I go there first thing in the morning and do it, and then I check in at multiple points through the day, like on lunch break, that sort of thing. And I do
Now,
think, oh, go ahead.
sorry, when you post to LinkedIn, does it matter? So like Facebook will downvote your link to the point where I now post links in comments and I don't even use the word click or link in the post. I say more
Yeah,
details in comment
yeah,
because Facebook will hide your post if you put a link in it.
yeah.
Is LinkedIn like that, or are they okay with sending people off the site?
I mean, I can't say for sure. It's because most of what I do is just link posting. On occasion, I will post images and then put the link in the comments. But I honestly, I haven't noticed a difference. Maybe some other people do. And please mention in the chat if you've noticed a big difference, but I haven't. But I'm not I'm not trying to work around the system either. So just to reassure people that it's okay to post the same thing in multiple places, I get sometimes people push back on me on this. Why would I post there when I've already posted it in these other places? I'm bothering people or whatever. I got this great email not that long ago from Liz Green saying, thanks for linking to your article on such and such. I also wanted to tell you I saw this on Facebook and meant to click on it, but got distracted. And then I saw it somewhere else and meant to read it and didn't. And then I finally saw it a third time, and that is when I read it. So I just want to encourage people, you are not bothering people. You're not being redundant. It is okay to mention things several times because we do not see everything in our feeds. And even if we do, we get distracted and we don't click. Okay, so moving on, keep, as you would on any social media, keep an eye out for the mentions. Go and show people you noticed that they mentioned you, comment, etc. And here's the thing that I probably dislike the most. People will drive into the comments and just use the canned responses for like very informative. Thank you so much for sharing. Keep motivating. Interesting. Great advice. It's just like, what are they
not helpful?
Yeah, what are they accomplishing here? And this is a phenomenon called commenting for reach. I actually am so annoyed by these, I delete them. I'm like, you are not reaching anywhere near me. Delete. And I, maybe LinkedIn really hates that I do this and they're penalizing the reach of my posts for, I don't know, don't care. But I feel like I want a tidy, valuable experience for everyone who might be looking through those comments. And especially for the people with no photo, I'm like, what are you doing? It's just really strange to me. I don't do you have any of those habits, Allison, on other social media? I know, like, for instance, Mark will actually block people that he thinks are bots on social media.
I block bots. With the Brevity blog, we actually just made it that any comment that has even one link in it has to be approved because comments with links in them are almost always bots.
Yeah.
I do find too that I actually try to respond to other people's comments. So, like, I wouldn't respond to one of these, but if someone left a thoughtful comment, I'd respond to it. So, yeah, I probably would delete it because I would feel like it would look like I was paying bots to comment on my stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So let's get to some of the more advanced tools that you might consider using if you wanted to invest some more time here. And I do think, Allison, you could potentially benefit. Nonfiction authors in general, especially if you're in a more prescriptive field, like where you're trying to teach something, I think this can be an area to seriously consider. So here's Nathan Baugh, the guy who mentioned me in a roundup, and I got that 100 connection requests. Whenever he posts, because he has a newsletter on LinkedIn, he gets this link underneath his profile name, view my newsletter. So LinkedIn is really trying to, sweeten the deal here for you and drive subscriptions. Obviously, this benefits them too. Keep that in mind. But you don't have to commit to a newsletter to just post some things on LinkedIn that are like bigger than a post. Like if you want to have a lengthy piece, you can do what's called an article. So that's what I have pictured here.
What's the difference between an article and a newsletter, and does it matter?
Keeping in mind, I don't use the newsletter functionality. The newsletter, as I understand it, is actually emailed out to people. And if I'm wrong about that, please correct me in the chat. Articles are not. So articles would just get shown to people as part of the general LinkedIn feed. Now, I'm not counting the digests that people get, like the LinkedIn digests of activity. People, control those settings themselves. But the newsletter, people are actually getting an email with that content sent to them. And Brian's saying I'm correct. Yeah.
Does it matter? Somebody asked this in the Q&A. Tracy says, I've heard that posting something on LinkedIn and then posting the same article or blog on your own website, Google doesn't like identical content posted in two different places. Is this true? Because I feel like I can either copy paste blogs I write from other places, or I can maybe like post a short version of them or something. But how much do I have to generate original content for LinkedIn?
I don't think you need to. So I have an example, in fact, of Josh Bernoff, who he's a business author, he's a ghostwriter. He repurposes his own content that appears at his website or at his blog. It gets sent via, I subscribe to his blog, not through LinkedIn, but through his website. So I get that every day. And then the same thing appears also on LinkedIn. Now, I think this fits what he's doing. Um, I don't think he's really trying to rank in Google for this content. Some of it is like curation. He's rounding up links and things of interest to his audience. So for anyone who is tempted to do like this repurposing or, posting in two places, I don't think it's going to hurt you unless you are trying to get site ranking. I think Josh has a few articles, maybe more than a few, that he probably does rank for in Google. Whether he would post those on LinkedIn, I don't know. I haven't asked him. But I do think if you're very concerned about SEO on your site and you know who you are, if that describes you, then I might not do that. But I do think it's an interesting thing to try. If it doesn't work, then I would stop.
And Anne says in the chat to create a newsletter from some of your older posts. So there's more of a time difference, although she hasn't tried a LinkedIn newsletter yet, because I've been looking back and I've been writing for Brevity since 2011. That's a lot of content that's kind of languishing in the archives, and I'd like to do something with it.
Actually, I just realized Josh's newsletter here on LinkedIn is a weekly, but he actually writes daily at his website. So he is creating a key difference there, where I imagine the LinkedIn version is like a digest of what's appeared at his site. And so I do think that's like my gut. Like, I really hate giving other sites my content, even if it's a day later, because of SEO reasons, but I'm very unique. I get a lot of search traffic. It looks like Josh here is trying to, have the best of both worlds by having the unique content at his site and then using LinkedIn as a digest form of what he's posting. So that's something to consider. Now, to go back for a minute, I have occasionally used the LinkedIn article functionality. So this is basically where it's much more than a post. You want, for instance, people to be able to go back to it. You might, in other words, you don't want it to get lost in posts from 3 years ago. You want to be able to people to find these articles because there's more substance to them. So earlier this year, there was this really whacked poll about what is the most popular genre, and it showed that history books were the most popular. I'm like, no, that is not correct. The most popular genre is romance, and you'll notice in that chart above, romance is like kind of in the middle. I'm like, I don't know who did this poll, but it's a rotten poll. But it was getting circulated everywhere and touted as saying something really fascinating that we didn't know. Like, look how popular literary fiction is. And I'm like, no, it's not.
No, it's not. It exists in a liminal space.
Exactly. So I had to say something. I did not, and it was just a quick something. In fact, I wrote a few like short social media posts. I can't remember where. It might have been Substack or Threads. Might have been, no, it couldn't have been Twitter. I was already off Twitter. Anyway, I thought, I need to expand this into something a little more meaningful. I did. I put it on my LinkedIn profile as an article. Publishers Weekly actually ended up mentioning it and linking to it from their newsletter.
Nice.
Would they have done that if it were on my standard site? I don't know, maybe. But this was it was a quick and dirty thing. I already have my blog scheduled out quite a bit, and I didn't want to interfere with that scheduling. And it was being talked about so much on social media and on LinkedIn. I thought this is just a good fit. So it was a gut decision. It's not something I do that often as far as publishing LinkedIn articles. So this just it it took off in a really nice way, and it accomplished what I wanted, which was to crush people's belief in this poll. All right. Josh Bernoff, he's such a fun guy. For anyone who doesn't know Josh, he's an expert, but he doesn't take himself too seriously. He has a book about writing without bullshit that everyone should probably read. Anyway, he did a really fun article recently about should you use exclamation points in LinkedIn posts. And his argument is no, you shouldn't. And everyone was very upset with him for that opinion. And so
I have to go read my emails and like remove a couple of exclamation points. But I think for anybody who's met me live, so many of my sentences do end with exclamation points. I mean, it just kind of is a thing. I'm excited to be here.
I think this is a fun piece to read and everyone's reactions, just to get a sense of the different ways that people look at LinkedIn, how they use it, how they feel about their profile or the vibes. And there's no right answer, okay? So just spoiler alert. But I know it made me curious about myself. I'm like, I do use lots of exclamation points in emails, but I went back to my LinkedIn post. I'm like, is he talking about me? And I actually don't use them. I moderate on LinkedIn. Like I censor my exclamation points. So I don't know. I just put it out there as a human behavior fun tidbit. All right.
I like that. I like that. That's okay. I engaged with a post on Twitter the other day where someone was decrying the comma splice. Don't use the comma splice. It's bad. I'm like, embrace the comma splice. The comma splice builds flow. Everyone should judiciously use the comma splice. We grammar nerds must stick together.
Okay, we're getting towards the end here, and we'll go to the Q&A box here in a minute. I just want to briefly mention groups. I have never gotten a moment's use out of the groups. There may be other people who get a lot of use out of them, but I find it I don't find that they're moderated that well. Some of them are much too big, like see that book Publishing Professionals with like 77,000 members. It's too big. But there may be some groups in there that are useful for someone. In the chat, please mention if you're part of a valuable LinkedIn group, because I think we all need to know which ones they really are. But you'll find collections of editors and agents, marketers, publicists, reviewers, and bloggers, blah, 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 blah. So you might be able to find some useful information in these groups or ask for help or, find leads. But personally, I do not engage there. I imagine you have not found any useful groups,
I've
Allison.
joined some, but they mostly seem to be people saying, buy my book. And that just doesn't feel super relevant. And if the group is too big, I can't meet anybody in it anyway. Right. Like I'm in some Facebook writers groups that are 3,000 to 5,000 people. I think that's as big as it can get, where I don't see the same people every day, but I do get to know people and get to interact with them. At one point, I joined a Facebook group that had something like 80,000 writers in it. And it was just like, I can't meet any of you. I can't know any of you. It's not worth my time to be there, because the only reason to be there is to like scroll through a bunch of people posting the exact same question because nobody saw it when it was asked yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm looking in the chat to see if there's anyone who there's people saying Facebook groups are more useful. There might be more useful groups in other professions, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of people saying, "Oh my goodness, yes, it's wonderful." So it might be a pass for this unless you wanted to start one that was one of the first useful LinkedIn groups known to writing and publishing. So here's what I would suggest for you, Allison, just based on what I know about your own practices and the huge amount of content that you've got. I would start posting links to your own stuff when you have something new, do what you would normally do elsewhere. If you haven't gone through and kind of methodically established connections with people in the writing and publishing community, I think that would benefit you. I would ask to for strategic reasons, what would you like to build your reputation for? Like as like a starting point, not as the final word, but just like what
Mhm.
do you wish people recognized you more often for doing? And then look at your repository of content that would feed into that goal. You could start a weekly newsletter, you could start a series of articles, whichever one of those appeals to you. And then as far as the posting, this could be articles too. You have
Mhm.
so many wonderful case studies, work that you've done with clients. I could see uh, LinkedIn loves the case study. I mean, it's a business site, right? So if you have these,
Okay.
you could post those, tag the people who were involved, um, and you would get a lot of mileage out of that.
I like that. And one of the things I've started thinking about doing too, I bought this kit that's like basically Mad Lib's outlines for blog posts that kind of fill a bunch of niches. Like one of the things I love about your website, Jane, is if I Google search for memoir book proposal or how to write a query, I get a Jane Friedman post on it. And I love it because for my clients, I know they can trust the work. I want to actively write some content that fits that kind of, I think they sometimes call them pillar posts,
Yeah.
where it's like
Yeah.
10 things you should do to fix your memoir and write it better right now.
Yeah.
And I'd like to, and that seems like content that would be really good for LinkedIn.
Yeah. I agree.
Okay. Yeah. Thank
So,
you. I'm making notes like the old fashioned way on paper.
so
This is
before we,
so, so helpful.
oh, good. So before we dig into the Q&A box, what else do you want to touch on, Allison? Is there anything you wanted to talk about?
Well, actually, I would love to ask the audience something. I know not all of you know me, but I know a chunk of you know me. And I would love to hear from you. What should I be emphasizing in terms of who I am and what I have to share with the writing community? Because it's not even so much like in the long run, the funnel of free information, hopefully for some of the people, it eventually leads to buy my stuff.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I feel really strongly about putting out a lot of free content, as do you, Jane, that is genuinely useful, that is the kind of information that people might otherwise have to pay for, or it might otherwise be unobtainable for them for some kind of privilege element, or it might be they need it delivered in this bite-sized chunk or with the example that I can give, or I can make it fun.
Mhm.
And I would love to hear from people like what are you looking for more of? You know, if you have the magic make Allison generate content button, what should I be posting out there? And thank you for putting those things in the chat. I really appreciate it. Please keep going with that because I'm going to get this chat later. And Jane, should we dive into the Q&A?
Yeah. Yeah. So Irina is curious about LinkedIn newsletters. Should you create one if you already have one? Like if you are like, what if you have a Substack, or is it better to always link to your newsletter content? I would probably point back to the Josh Bernoff model here and say, I think, that's a really nice middle way, not to give it like first dibs on everything, but to create a weekly digest, unless you have so much content that you can repurpose, as Allison does, that you might start an original newsletter series that is going to be continually fed with all of this material. Um, but so much here, I think, depends on what sort of author you are and what your material is. So, I don't know that that makes a lot of sense, for example, for memoirists. And I think Irina is a memoirist. It could make a ton of sense for business authors like Josh Bernoff is. Annalise says, I'm curious how to make the shift since LinkedIn has been exclusively corporate, and I'm not sure how to add or adapt my existing profile now that I'm writing and want to show up as an author. I have a lot of connections, so I'd like to make the most of it. Any tips? Um, I encounter this quite a bit with people like Brian Rendell, who I know it has been attending. I think he's still here, and with the children's author I showed who was in finance, where they are going through a career transition and they're trying to decide, how do I meld together this professional life I've had and this new creative undertaking? I don't know how much of them fit together. And what I would say is don't lose the connections or the relationships or the experience that are already reflected there, but I would put them on the back burner. So retain it, but change your profile to put the creative life front and center, and then let the other aspects still be there working for you for the people who want to stay connected with what you're doing now in life. And an example I'll use here, actually, she's going to be our next free session presenter, Jewel Kuchera. She used to do corporate training for McDonald's. She worked at P&G as a diversity officer. You know, she has or no, it was Fifth Third. She has this huge corporate background for like 3 or 4 decades. And now what is she doing? She's writing full time. And she's doing story structure analysis and creating tools for writers. And if you go to her LinkedIn profile, you'll find that all of that corporate background is still there, but she's really focused now on what she's doing now and what she wants to be known for now. So that's what I would suggest. If you're going to be using LinkedIn in the way that I've suggested today, then position your profile to support the activity you're engaging in right now, or at least that you're using LinkedIn for. I hope that helps. Allison, do you have anything to add? Since you've got the
and I mean,
circus piece.
I think this also ties into some questions in the chat about, should I accept comments from everybody? Does it matter if they're followers or connections? And one of our chat people actually said this earlier, which is, I want to create the network that I want to be part of. Yeah. And I mean, I click through and see, is this person a writer? Is this someone who they're going to like what I have to say? Because it's not useful for them either to be connected to me if they're not going to enjoy what I have to say.
Right. Betsy says, in the past, when I updated my LinkedIn, my platform went through my contacts and notified everyone, which was not what I wanted. I am familiar with that. That has happened to me as well. She says, I'm now planning to write books about technology, but I only want to notify a business audience. Suggestions. I don't know that there's a way to segment who gets notified, unfortunately. You can turn off like if you make a change to your profile, if you add a position, if you change the headline, you do now have the ability to suppress people being notified in their feed about it if you're just, making some improvements. But I don't think you can segment who gets notified and who doesn't, unfortunately. So sorry about that. Do you see any questions, Allison, that we should answer?
Well, I think something that probably addresses a lot of our authors who are present, if writing is not their primary job, if they also have like a sort of writing affiliated job, like Rachel is both a freelancer and a novelist. Irina was saying that she is a writer, and then she's also a journalist and an editor. How do you prioritize what you're sharing on LinkedIn? I mean, I feel like my advice, just from what I've heard you say today, is if what you need is to connect with people in your business life, prioritize that, because it's not going to feed your writing enough to make it worth sidestepping your business life. If your writing is getting more prominent, like with Brian moving from being a full-time accountant to being a full-time writer, maybe you would then focus more on building your writing community. Can you weigh in on that?
Yeah, I think this gives me an opportunity to say that getting more active on LinkedIn isn't going to be the answer for everyone if you're looking for an escape hatch from other social media. So much depends on how you're making your living right now and what you've been using LinkedIn for. Like if it's been a really valuable or quality place for you for that living that you're making that has nothing to do with your writing, I'm not so sure I would go and upend that. But if LinkedIn has just kind of been a dormant place or like the wasteland that I used to treat it as, it's probably time to change your mind about that and decide, how can I make this platform serve me? Because if you do get active on it, I do think there are some rewards. I don't think there's a wrong way to do it though. And I also think people I hope they respect in your professional life. If you're doing some writing or creative work, they respect that you are a multifaceted person and you are allowed to do different things. And not everything has to be exactly focused on only your job 24/7. So that's what I would say.
And we have one more question from Jesse. As someone who is switching from a more professional LinkedIn setup to an author focus, how do we find other authors to follow and reset her feed? She's still getting a lot of vendors trying to sell her stuff, and she hasn't found search to be super useful. So, Jane, tell me if this is the right answer. I would go to your feed. And number one, I'd watch who you're following rather than your followers, because chances are really good that you're following a more selective list of people who would be connections in the publishing industry. Then I would look for what authors are following those people. And I would start doing, as LinkedIn, I think, is designed to do, where you start to reach the connections of your connections. And I know also a lot of people have posted their LinkedIn links in the chat. And I think starting with those people is a really good place to start as well.
Yeah, that's such great advice. It's, follow the breadcrumb trail of other people's followings or followers or their comment threads. If you can just find one or two people you consider lookalikes that are in the same circles that you want to move in, that's a great starting point. And then the other thing I would say, if you're active on some other platform, doesn't matter which, start looking for those people on LinkedIn and start connecting that way if you can.
Yeah. And I think it sounds like there may be some different buttons to press. There may be some etiquette that I need to learn as far as interacting on the site, but it sounds like the rules are basically the same as any other site I'm on. Listen and pay attention to see what the discourse is like, see what I have to add to that discourse, and then start showing up in a regular routine way, not for 9 million hours a day, for maybe 20 minutes a day, or maybe an hour twice a week, and consistently show up and interact. And I mean, I think that's true live, it's true online, and it's true in every social media network we're ever part of.
Yeah. I can't say it better than that. That's what it boils down to.
Thanks. Read the room, show up regularly. That's the key.
That's right.
Yeah.
Indeed. Well, we're at the 1 hour mark. Allison, thank you so much for providing a very rich area for us to discuss, especially at this moment in time. I feel like this was maybe needed for a lot of people who are rethinking where they want to be active online.
Thanks, Jane. You're the best.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you all for spending time with us today. I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.